history of France, which is located in the very center of Europe, began long before the appearance of permanent human settlements. Convenient physical and geographical position, proximity to the seas, rich reserves of natural resources have contributed to France being the locomotive of the European continent throughout its history. And this is how the country remains today. Occupying leading positions in the European Union, the UN, and NATO, the French Republic remains in the 21st century a state whose history is being created every day. Country of the Franks, if the name of France is translated from Latin, is located in Western Europe. The neighbors of this romantic and beautiful country are Belgium, Germany, Andorra, Spain, Luxembourg, Monaco, Switzerland, Italy, and the shores of France are washed by the warm Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. The territory of the Republic is covered with mountains, plains, beaches, and forests. Hidden among the picturesque nature are numerous natural monuments, historical, architectural, cultural attractions, ruins of castles, caves, whom the Romans called Gauls, came to the lands of the modern French Republic. These tribes became the core of the formation of the future French nation. The Romans called the territory inhabited by the Gauls or Celts Gaul, which was part of the Roman Empire, as a separate province. In the 7th-6th centuries BC, Phoenicians and Greeks from Asia Minor sailed to Gaul on ships and founded colonies on the Mediterranean. Now in their place, there are cities such as Nice, Antibes, Marseille. Between 58 and 52 BC, Gaul was captured by the Roman soldiers of Julius Caesar. The result of more than 500 years of rule was the complete Romanization of the population. During Roman rule, other important events took place in the history of the peoples of future France. In the 3rd century AD, Christianity penetrated into Gaul and began to spread. Invasion of the Franks, who conquered the Gauls. After the Franks came the Burgundians, Alemanni, Visigoths, and Huns, who completely put an end to Roman rule. The Franks gave names to the peoples who lived in Gaul, created the first state here, and founded the first dynasty. The territory of France, even before our era, became one of the centers of constant migration flows that passed from north to south, from west to east. All these tribes left their mark on the development of Gaul, and the Gauls adopted elements of, but it was the Franks who had the greatest influence, who managed not only to drive out the Romans, but to create their own kingdom in Western Europe. The founder of the first state in the expanses of the former Gaul is King Clovis, who headed the Franks during their arrival in Western Europe. Clovis was a representative of the Merovingian dynasty, which was founded by the legendary Merovii. He is considered a mythical personality, as 100 confirmation of his existence is not found. Clovis is considered Merovee's grandson, and he was a worthy successor to the traditions of his legendary grandfather. Clovis had headed the Frankish kingdom since 481, by which time he had become famous for numerous military campaigns. Clovis converted to Christianity. He was baptized in Reims, which happened in 496. This city became the center of baptism of the rest of the kings. Clovis's wife was Queen Clotilde, who together with her husband revered Saint Genevieve. She was the patroness of the capital of France, the city of Paris. The following rulers of the state were named in honor of Clovis. Only in the French version this name sounds like Louis. Clovis I divided the country between his 4 sons, who did not leave any special traces in the history of France. After Clovis, the Merovingian dynasty began to gradually fade away, since the rulers practically did not leave the palace. Therefore, the stay in power of the descendants of the first Frankish ruler is called in historiography the period of lazy kings. The last of the Merovingians, Childeric III, became the last king of his dynasty on the Frankish throne. He was replaced by Pepin the Short, so nicknamed for his small stature. Pepin came to power in the mid-8th century and founded a new dynasty in France. It was called Carolingian, but not on behalf of Pepin the Short, but his son, Charlemagne. Pepin went down in history as a skillful manager who, before his coronation, was the mayor of Childeric III. Pepin actually ruled the life of the kingdom and determined the directions of the kingdom's foreign and domestic policies. Pepin also became famous as a skilled warrior, strategist, brilliant and cunning politician, who during his 17-year reign enjoyed the constant support of the Catholic Church, and such cooperation of the ruling House of the Franks ended with the head of the Roman Catholic Church prohibiting the French from choosing representatives of other dynasties to the royal throne. So he supported the Carolingian dynasty and kingdom.
The heyday of France began under Pepin's son, Charles, who spent most of his life in military campaigns. As a result, the territory of the state increased several times. In 800, Charlemagne became emperor. He was elevated to a new position by the Pope, who put the crown on the head of Charles, whose reforms and skillful leadership brought France to the top of the leading medieval states. Under Charles, the centralization of the kingdom was laid down. The principle of succession to the throne was defined. The next king was Louis I, the Pious, the son of Charlemagne, who successfully continued the policies of his great father. Representatives of the Carolingian dynasty were unable to maintain a centralized unified state. Therefore, in the 11th century, Charlemagne's state fell apart into separate parts. The last king of the Carolingian family was Louis V. When he died, Abbot Hugo Capt ascended the throne. The nickname arose from the fact that he always wore a capa, i.e., a secular priest robe, which emphasized his ecclesiastical rank after ascending to the throne as king. The rule of representatives of the Capetian dynasty is characterized by the following: development of feudal relations. The emergence of new classes of French society: lords, feudal lords, vassals, dependent peasants. Vassals were in the service of lords and feudal lords who were obliged to protect their subjects. The latter paid them not only through military service, but also tribute in the form of food and cash rent. Religious wars constantly occurred, which coincided with the period of the Crusades in Europe, which began in 1195. The Capetians and many French were participants in the Crusades, participating in the defense and liberation of the Holy Sepulchre. The Capetians ruled until 1328, bringing France to a new level of development. But the heirs of Hugo Capt failed to stay in power. The Middle Ages dictated its own rules, and a stronger and more cunning politician, whose name was Philip V from the Valois dynasty, soon came to power. These centuries were very turbulent for the kingdom. The main events include the following. In 1598, the Edict of Nantes, which was issued by Henry IV, ended the religious wars in France. Huguenots became full members of French society. France took an active part in the First International Conflict, the 30 Years' War of 1618-1648. A kingdom experienced its golden age in the 17th century, under the reign of Louis XIII and Louis XIV, as well as the Grey Cardinals Richelieu and Mazarin. The nobles constantly fought with the royal power to expand their rights. At the end of the 18th century, the Great French Revolution began in France, which caused the elimination of the monarchy and the establishment of the dictatorship of Napoleon. At the beginning of the 19th century, Napoleon proclaimed France an empire. In the 1830s, an attempt was made to restore the monarchy, which lasted until 1848. In 1848, a revolution called the Spring of Nations broke out in France, as in other countries of Western and Central Europe. The consequence of the revolutionary 19th century was the establishment of the Second Republic in France, which lasted until 1852. The empire was replaced by the Paris Commune, which brought about the establishment of the Third Republic. It existed until 1940. At the end of the 19th century, the country's leadership pursued an active foreign policy, creating new colonies in different regions of the world: North Africa, Madagascar, Equatorial Africa, West Africa. During the 1890s, 19th century France constantly competed with Germany. Contradictions between states deepened and aggravated, which caused the separation of countries from each other. France found allies in England and Russia, which contributed to the formation of the Entente. The First World War, which began in 1914, became a chance for France to regain lost Alsace and Lorraine. Germany, under the Treaty of Versailles, was forced to give this region back to the Republic, as a result of which the borders and territory of France acquired modern contours. During the interwar period, the country actively participated in the Paris Conference and fought for spheres of influence in Europe. Therefore, she actively took part in the actions of the Entente countries. In particular, together with Britain, it sent its ships to Ukraine in 1918 to fight against the Austrians and Germans, who were helping the government of the Ukrainian People's Republic drive the Bolsheviks out of their territory. In the mid-1920s, diplomatic relations were established with the Soviet Union, and a non-aggression pact was signed with the leadership of this country. Fearing the strengthening of the fascist regime in Europe and the activation of far-right organizations in the Republic, France tried to create military-political alliances with European states. But this did not save France from the German attack in May 1940. Within a few weeks, Wehrmacht troops captured and occupied all of France, establishing the pro-fascist Vichy regime in the Republic. The Second World War hit the political, social, and economic life of France hard. The Marshall Plan and the country's participation in economic European integration processes, which in the early 1950s helped to overcome the crisis, unfolded in Europe. In the mid-1950s, France abandoned its colonial possessions in Africa, granting independence to the former colonies. Political and economic life stabilized during the presidency of Charles de Gaulle, who led France in 1958. Under him, the Fifth Republic of France was proclaimed. De Gaulle made the country a leader on the European continent. Progressive laws were adopted that changed the social life of the Republic. In particular, women received the right to vote, study, choose professions, and create their own organizations and movements. Modern France is an actively developing European country, which is a participant in many European, international, and regional organizations and influences the formation of the world market. There are internal problems in the country, but the well-thought-out successful policy of the government and the new leader of the Republic, Macron, is helping to develop new methods of combating terrorism, the economic crisis, and the problem of Syrian refugees. France is developing in accordance with global trends, changing social and legal legislation so that both the French and migrants feel comfortable living in France.